The Falcon Heavy showed no sign of rust as it took off again on its fourth mission. It has been 3 years since it was last used, giving a display that left everyone awestruck at this point. Even NASA is shocked by SpaceX ingenuity. When will we see the Falcon Heavy fly next, and can we expect more SpaceX launches next year? We have all the details and save the best for last. To launch the SpaceX Falcon Heavy, a towering 3-pronged spacecraft that just happens to be the most powerful operational rocket in the world, went to space for the first time since 2019. The launch took place in the early hours of the day on the 1st of November from Kennedy Space Center, Florida. This launch marks SpaceX's 50th space flight this year, a feat that no other commercial aerospace company or NASA has achieved. The vehicle was used for the highly classified US-44 mission for the U.S. Space Force and its Falcon Heavy's first operational national security mission. The rocket carried experimental satellites for the Pentagon, and the success of the mission got Falcon Heavy certified for the National Security Space Launch Program. Its first 3 missions were all performed perfectly with little issues on the launch pad, and during liftoff the USSF-4 mission was originally scheduled to happen more than 2 years ago, but there were several payload issues that kept pushing the timeline on the mission, and the Falcon Heavy was kept waiting since there was no other mission that required its capabilities among the payload carried. During the mission were 2 space vehicles, including the Shepard demonstration mission and long-duration propulsion involved expendable launch vehicle, or LP-2 for short. LP-2 will deploy satellites to enhance different technologies like communication and space weather sensing. The second vehicle will test new vehicles that will expedite risk reduction efforts and improve proximity operations and safe rendezvous. The U.S. Space Force only allowed SpaceX to stream 9 minutes of the launch, but it was more than enough for everyone eager to see the Falcon Heavy in action. Once again, but before the launch took place, a representative of SpaceX announced that there would be a double sonic boom that will occur as the boosters land on Landing Zone 1 and Landing Zone 2. Over the course of 9 minutes, the Falcon twin boosters, both flying for the first time, helping send the rocket into space before separation from the upper stage center core and payload to boost back towards the landing pads in Florida less than 8 minutes after liftoff. The twin boosters touched down seconds apart. The expendable core booster continued burning for an additional 90 seconds before it was separated from the upper stage and returned at a speed of 4 km per second. SpaceX didn't have any plans for recovering it like the previous 2, and it ran out of fuel on its way back and splashed into the ocean where it was recovered. Those who were present for the launch were looking at a 230 feet tall rocket that packs an impressive 27 Merlin engines capable of producing 5 million pounds of thrust, that is the equivalent of 18 Boeing 747s, as the most powerful rocket in the world today. By a factor of 2, Falcon Heavy has a payload capacity of 64 metric tons, more than twice the payload of the closest operational vehicle, Delta V Heavy. For contact, the Falcon Heavy can carry a Boeing 737 airliner with all its passengers, luggages and fuel to space. Geosynchronous launch US-44 is SpaceX's first geosynchronous launch. This means that the Falcon Heavy delivered the military's payload to a circular geosynchronous orbit 22,400 miles above Earth's surface. For those not in the know, geosynchronous means that the spacecraft's orbital velocity matches the rotation velocity of Earth at that altitude. It is a popular location for Earth observation and communication satellites that want to observe the same region at the same time on the direct-to-geo launch. The Falcon Heavy did all the work after reaching a parking orbit and low Earth orbit. The upper stage of the rocket may have performed a second burn to reach the desired orbit. It will keep going for 5 to 6 hours, while conducting a complex ballet of thermal management and tank pressure maintenance to prevent all of its cryogenic liquid oxygen or logs from boiling into gas and its refined kerosene from freezing into an unusable slush. The Falcon Heavy upper stage must also survive Earth's radiation belts before it reaches a circular geosynchronous orbit and deploys the payload. This could take up to an hour, and once completed, the upper stage doesn't return to Earth but completes at least 2 more burns to move itself to its final destination a few hundred kilometers away from the geosynchronous orbit. The next mission may launch as soon as December. The Falcon Heavy could either take on another military satellite on behalf of Space Force or launch a communication satellite for Viasat to begin Falcon Heavy's development. Viasat and SpaceX also have a dispute over Starlink's Rural Digital Opportunity Fund award, as the company claimed that Starlink didn't meet the requirements. SpaceX, on the other hand, gave a passionate response to what it called a misguided campaign for Viasat. To insert itself in the commission staff's review, SpaceX argued that Viasat didn't have a sincere complaint and all it was trying to do was prevent any competition at all costs to its legacy technology. The bridge as SpaceX prepares to undergo its next mission for their arrival on November 8, the company released a statement that it won't be ready to launch with SpaceX this year during the company's financial results call. Viasat CEO Mark Dangberg said that the company is working together with SpaceX to set a deadline for the launch in the earliest part of the quarter in 2022. However, this will depend on U.S. high-priority missions that will also be using the Falcon Heavy now that Viasat isn't launching in December, as many hoped a classified payload for Space Force is expected to be taken as space as early as January 2023 soon. After the November 1 launch, the Space Systems Command confirmed that Falcon Heavy's next launch will happen in 2023. The military confirmed that the mission US-67 would reuse two of the boosters that launched USS F-44 3 weeks after the launch. The U.S. Space Force is still confident that Falcon Heavy will be ready in January or February next year. Assuming that the consistent schedule is intentional and not due to lack of communication with SpaceX, then this is good news. It shows that SpaceX was able to recover the used rockets, thoroughly inspect each booster and fix any damage, with little to no issues if any problem had been discovered with the boosters. After the most recent mission US-67 would certainly be delayed, it also shows that the performance and usability of Falcon Heavy hasn't changed much since it was locked away 40 months ago, and the technology behind it can be improved upon to make a more reusable rocket. The powerful launch of the Falcon Heavy was a beauty to behold, and seeing the launch made people more excited for the first Starship launch. NASA's December timeline for the first orbital launch has not changed, and even though the Falcon Heavy will not be in action again this year, from Starbase Boca Chica facility, and SpaceX is already preparing to complete its final test before liftoff, all 33 engines of the Starship must undergo a simultaneous bench burn, and this will be the first time all engines will be ignited at the same time, and the changes of refueling the rocket will also be tested. This is going to be a huge milestone, not just for SpaceX but for the aerospace industry as a whole, and it's fair to say that everyone is waiting to see what the Starship is capable of if it goes well. Meanwhile, SpaceX is actively trying to turn the sci-fi dream of a Martian colony into reality. The company is developing a 100-passenger spaceship called Starship and a giant rocket known as Super Heavy, which together constitute the transportation system that Musk thinks will bring more settlement within reach at long last. When Musk revealed his idea to the world, he laid out a basic plan: a large spacecraft and a huge rocket, both of which will be completely and rapidly reusable. The rocket will launch his envisioned concept as the Mars Colonial Transporter. Back then, Musk stated that it will stand 400 feet tall. When stacked, the rocket will contribute most of that height, measuring 2,254 feet tall, to the ship's 162 feet. Next-generation Raptor engine, which is more powerful than the Merlin that propels the company's Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets. Its ship will sport 9 Raptors, and the 40-foot-wide booster will boast a whopping 42, allowing the rocket to produce 13,033 tons of thrust at liftoff, 3.6 times more than NASA's Saturn V moon rocket was able to generate. And there won't just be one its ship and booster. The ultimate plan involves sending 1,000 or more people-packed spaceships to Mars every 26 months, helping to establish a million-person city on the red planet within 50 to 100 years. Elon Musk did not lay out plans for building this city that will happen organically as more and more people arrive on Mars, he said, comparing it's to the transcontinent and a railroad that helped open the American West to settlement from the East and Midwest in the 19th century. And these pioneers won't just be the super rich. If all goes according to plan, its reusability could eventually bring the price of a Mars trip down enough to make it affordable for large numbers of people. This overall vision has held firm over the past 3 years, but Elon Musk has repeatedly tweaked the design and the system's name. In 2017, for example, he announced that it was now the BFR, which stood for Big Falcon Rocket. The BFR was shorter, slimmer, and less powerful than its design predecessor, measuring 348 feet tall by 30 feet wide. when stacked and featuring only 31 Raptor engines on the booster and 6 on the spaceship. But the biggest change concerned the use of the spaceship rocket duo. Elon Musk announced that SpaceX eventually planned to employ the BFR for all of its space flight needs, from launching satellites to ferrying people to and from Mars to cleaning up space junk in Earth orbit. The Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy therefore will be phased out over the long haul, as will both the crew and cargo variants of SpaceX's Dragon capsule. Musk stated that expanding the VFR's role in this manner will make the system much more affordable for SpaceX to develop and manage. Manufacturer the BFR design then experienced a growth spurt that nearly took the system back to its original height. The current plan calls for 6 Raptors on the Starship vehicle rather than 7, and a few months after that he tweeted that Super Heavy will sport 35 Raptors instead of 31. That brings us to the latest design update, which Musk presented on September 28, 2019. The billionaire didn't announce any huge changes, though there was some more engine news. Super Heavy will now have space for 37 Raptors, though not all of those slots will be filled on every flight. Each mission will probably require at least 24 Raptors on the booster, Musk had previously estimated the total development cost of the Starship project to be between $2 billion and $10 billion. He later stated that the price tag for SpaceX will be toward the lower end of that range. After the initial launch, the rocket is responsible for delivering the Starship crew capsule to orbit around the Earth after it is done, so the booster will detach and steer itself towards a soft landing back at the launch pad. While this feat seemed almost impossible at first, SpaceX rockets have been doing it successfully for several years. Now the next stage would involve the booster picking up a fuel tanker and carrying it into orbit as well. This fuel tanker will then be used to replenish the Starship for its voyage toward Mars. Once en route, this craft will deploy solar panels to harvest energy from the sun in an attempt to save precious onboard fuel for what will be an exciting and groundbreaking landing on the Red Planet. According to Musk's vision, these crafts and their crew will remain in Earth's orbit until a planetary alignment brings the Earth and Mars closer together. This is a window that opens once every 26 months. The long-term plan for SpaceX is to have many hundreds of spaceships waiting in orbit to depart en masse as a part of the Mars colonial fleet. Perhaps the most important part for this entire plan to work is the reusability of the boosters. Musk's plan revolves around making sure that each spaceship is capable of being reused as much as possible. He states that there is no way to have a self-sustaining colony on Mars without reusability. It's a fundamental part of the plan. He also adds that if the wooden sailing ships from the old days were not reusable, the United States probably wouldn't have existed. SpaceX estimates it'll be able to use each of its rocket boosters a whopping 1,000 times, each tanker 100 times, any spaceship at least 12 times. The first missions are only estimated to carry around 100 people on each ship, but gradually that number is expected to increase to more than 200. According to these estimates, putting 1 million people on the surface of Mars could take anywhere from 40 to 100 years. After the maiden voyage, the reusability of the rockets also means that once they're, the crafts can then be used to return to Earth whenever needed. After a few uncrewed cargo supply missions have already landed on Mars, the human phase of colonization will finally be ready to begin. One of the biggest hurdles that stayed in the way is the Red Planet's notoriously thin atmosphere. NASA had to be extra careful when landing their Curiosity rover on the planet, which weighed a mere 2,000 pounds and is a tiny fraction of the total payload that the manned missions will carry. This is one of the reasons why SpaceX continues to perfect its supersonic retro rocket technology, so they can gradually enter the Martian atmosphere and lower a very heavy spacecraft under the surface using this reusable method. That's not all, though. Entering the atmosphere is another problem that needs attention. The craft needs to withstand a heated entry to the planet and perform a propulsive landing while still being capable of refueling and going back to Earth to start over again when needed. After the supply runs are complete, humans can finally make their way to Mars. The first crew will need to rely on digging beneath the surface and dredging up buried ice. This will be used as a water source, which will eventually power the entire colony. When the essential crews consisting of scientists and engineers have finally set up, competition will start over the first few seats that can take willing individuals to the newly colonized planet. The new Starship, with such lofty plans for the future, a lot depends on the performance of the Raptor engines, which are at the core of every new rocket used by SpaceX. The company makes regular upgrades to the engine to improve its efficiency and reusability. In recent months, SpaceX has used two variants of the engine, with the newer one dubbed Raptor 2. The Raptor engine is a full-flow stage combustion cycle engine that runs on super-chilled liquid oxygen and super-chilled liquid methane, both of which will power SpaceX's next-generation vehicle Starship. The first stage of Starship, called Super Heavy, will be jam-packed with 33 Raptor engines, 20 non-gimbaling Raptor engines in the outermost ring, 10 gimbaling engines in the middle ring, and 3 gimbaling central engines in the innermost ring. This number is expected to decrease in the future as SpaceX further upgrades Raptor. The Starship currently hosts 6 total engines, 3 vacuum-optimized non-gimbaling engines and 3 sea-level gimbaling engines, as research and development continues on the Starship. The latest news from SpaceX is that a new prototype for the vehicle has successfully undergone a static fire test of its engines ahead of its first planned orbital test flight, marking the highest number of the company's new Raptor engines ever tested at the same time to prepare for Starship's maiden orbital flight. SpaceX has been conducting static fire tests with increasing intensity, in which more engines are ignited, in addition to its inevitable role in getting humans to Mars. This is leading up to Starship's eventual participation in NASA's Artemis program to return astronauts to the surface of the Moon as soon as 2025. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.